All right, everybody. Welcome back to Strongman Personal Finance. Like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell button for notifications. Send me an email if you have any questions, and I'll give you a live anonymous video response, all right? I say it on every freaking video, but none of you email me except for like 2 people. Now, I have a question from a Mr. A. We'll keep him anonymous. He says, hey, Strongman. That's me, because I lift, or at least I used to when they had gyms open. He said, please keep me anonymous. I want to get your opinion on what the low interest rates will do to the housing market in the long term across the country. Do you think that this is going to make it almost impossible for people that don't already own a home to buy? All I hear is that the super rich are coming in and buying up multiple houses all at once because of the low interest rates. Also, I have multiple friends in the real estate industry that are saying there's little supply with everyone moving out of big cities into smaller rural areas with cheaper housing markets. Do you think that housing prices will skyrocket in the future, especially in more tax-friendly states? What is your opinion on the housing market in the future? Well, number one, I just want to tell you right now, I don't know the future. I just kind of react based on what I see right now. And I can kind of make a prediction, but I could be totally wrong. Now, you ask, do I think housing prices are skyrocketing? Well, they already are. And actually, there's a thing called a housing price index. I think it's put out by like Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. It's like one of the government or quasi-government mortgage providers. And of course, there's probably other sources where you can find housing prices. But recently, housing prices have started to skyrocket. They've started to accelerate and grow faster than they normally have over the past couple of years. And that's for one simple reason, because interest rates are down. And obviously, it's common sense if you think about it. If interest rates are down, if the Federal Reserve, the central bank, lowers interest rates, that has a ripple effect to the entire economy. And they lower interest rates to kind of stimulate commerce and spending. Because if you can borrow money cheaply, because it's plentiful, you're more likely, if you're a bank, to lend out the money to try to make money. And you're more likely to take on debt to buy a house or buy a car because the interest rate is lower. You're not going to pay as much. And this even happened in my life. I was thinking about buying a house in a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, I saw these interest rates for the mortgages going down and down and down. And I was like, man, I need to move right now. And I'm sure that's been repeated over, thousands or millions of households in the United States because mortgage rates are so freaking low. Everybody wants to go buy a house if they can, and they want to buy it now. So that's what's happening. Everybody's going out. They want houses. That creates a lot of demand. And if there's a fixed supply, well, that's going to increase prices. And that's what's happening across the United States. But it's not in every single location. Obviously, you kind of correctly identified that people are leaving cities and they're going to cheaper areas. And that makes sense because we've basically proven that for most jobs that are like clerical jobs, you can telework. You don't need to freaking go to an office. So there's no point in living in this super expensive liberal communist city that charges you ridiculous tax rates. It's better to just up and leave, go to a cheap place that has lower property taxes, less communism, and has cheaper houses. So a lot of people are doing that. But in the long run, I think everything always self-corrects. So for example, California. California used to not even be settled. And then people started flooding there for the gold rush. And then eventually, besides Indians, of course, okay? But you had the gold rush, and then eventually California grew and grew and grew. And now it's so heavily populated that there's huge amounts of people crammed into a small space, which generally drives up housing prices. Eventually, that self-corrects because there's tons of people that get squeezed out, and they say, screw this. Everything's too expensive. I'm going to move to a cheap place. So they move, let's say, to a new city like Austin. Well, what happens? Eventually, the same effect happens in other cities. People leave one area and they start flooding these other areas that are, better places to live because they have cheaper whatever. But eventually, that cycle kind of continues, or it gets reborn where people flood to one place, housing prices go up and up and up. Then housing prices get too high, and then people freaking leave. So in the long run, it's kind of a self-correcting thing. Now, when it comes to low interest rates, I can't predict what the Federal Reserve is going to do. I mean, obviously they want to keep rates low because that stimulates the economy. And right now we're in a slowdown, obviously, because of the virus. So they're going to keep rates low for a long time. And the only way I see this really correcting on a macro scale is if rates start going up. But until that happens, if rates stay low, there's going to be a pretty big demand for housing. And then if you think about it, the government, they're also talking about doing like a house down payment program where they give lower income people, I think like $15,000 as a tax credit to buy a house. So what is that going to do? That's going to create even more demand for freaking houses. So in the short to near term, yeah, I think housing prices are going to keep going up and up and up. And it's actually accelerating. The slope is actually steeper recently because they lowered rates. And that'll continue for a while. So do I think we're in a housing bubble? I don't necessarily know because, like in 2007, 2008, a lot of people were buying houses that they couldn't really afford. Whereas now I think people are buying houses that they can afford. They're just locking in lower interest rates. So it's a little bit different, but it'll have to play out. Maybe we are in a housing bubble. We'll see. But I don't really think so right now. When it comes to the super rich buying up multiple houses, I mean, that's possible. I haven't really read much about the super rich buying up houses, but I don't think the super rich are just going to buy every freaking house in the country. We actually have pretty high home ownership rates in the United States. So with the government eventually maybe stepping in to help lower income people, I think our home ownership rates will still be pretty high. But housing prices will probably accelerate or keep growing at a rapid pace for the near term. It's all based on interest rates. When rates go up, housing prices tend to go down because it becomes more expensive to buy homes, which then decreases demand for the homes, and that generally decreases prices. Whereas if you have lower rates, that increases demand of homes because more people can afford them, and that raises housing prices. So that's kind of my thoughts. I mean, if you're just an average person, you can still afford to live in a ton of states. You're just going to have to look at the map of the U.S. and say, okay, what is my skill set? Where are housing prices not really exploding as rapidly? And maybe I'll go there. Because there's some states that are seeing massive increases, and there's other states that aren't. It really depends on where you are in the United States. If you're in a high demand area, yeah, your freaking housing prices are going to go up. But if you're living in, some bumpkin place or a place that's not really attractive for a bunch of, outsiders moving in, maybe housing prices won't go up. So you can really you can go check a map of the United States or say housing prices growth per state or by each state in Google. And you can kind of see where housing prices are starting to increase and where they're really not. So it's not like a blanket thing across the United States. So that's kind of my thought there. You're welcome, buddy. I got 2 more videos coming out today. And then I'm going to go to the bar. Do you have any questions? I'm going to cut out of this one. I'm going to go to my next video. Questions? Okay. Stay tuned. I'll be back.